Honourable David Cunliffe.
Talofa lava, Mr Speaker. I'd also like to recognise Samoan Language Week and also to acknowledge 50 years of anniversary since its independence from New Zealand administration, the record of which was not a proud record, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the member who's just resumed his seat opened his speech by saying, some people say we're Tories who don't care. Now, I would never say that about that member. I would say that his record of service before he entered this House proves that he does care. In fact, I nearly appointed him to the Auckland Health Board because of that service. Perhaps, given where he sits now, I should have. But Mr Speaker, I would not say he doesn't care. What I would say is that the policies his party's advancing are not going to achieve the hopes and dreams that he says he stands for. He said that he wants all our kids to leave school to reach their potential. Then don't increase their class sizes, Mr Speaker. Don't turn intermediate school classes from 30 to 40 children. And don't continue to spend $35 million a year subsidising private schools which don't need it while cutting funding to low decile public schools. And Mr Speaker, while you're at it, don't waste millions on league tables that all the evidence shows is a complete waste of money and achieves nothing for our students. Or the wider agenda, don't cut taxes for the wealthy, for the very wealthy, by putting up GST on every loaf of bread that is bought by needy families in his own South Auckland. That is what we don't do if we hope our people will be better off. And a little pointer for the member, the Reverend Doctor, who's just resumed his seat, a little humility lesson. In the 9 years of the Labour government, the last Labour government, life expectancy itself increased by 3 years. 1 year longer for every 3 years we were in office. Debt was cut to zero. We ran surpluses every year, and every region of New Zealand grew. So a little humility around the historical record would be in order. Mr Speaker, the members have had an emotional dinner break and they're back in fine form, Mr Speaker. Liquidity is flowing tonight, quite obviously. But Mr Speaker, in this budget debate, Mr Speaker, it's rather easy for us to talk in big numbers or big words. We talk about billions of dollars of trade deficit or hundreds of thousands of people unemployed, and it's easy to forget that every one of those people is a New Zealander, a hard-working Kiwi who wants to do the right thing for themselves and their family, who wants a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. Remember that and get ahead. Mr Speaker, now the reality for too many is no work at all. Or if they can get work, they're working 2 or 3 jobs to pay the rent and make ends meet, all the time worried to death that their children aren't seeing enough of their parents. That's the reality for so many in our society. Or the 1,000 a week who are making their way to the departure gates as they move permanently to Australia. That's twice, roughly, the number of members of this whole House every working day. 2 Houses of Parliament leave for Australia permanently because we can see the hope dying in their eyes as they have lasted for 4 years under this government, being promised that growth, that more jobs were just around the corner, but it's a corner that never comes, Mr Speaker. Or the small business person or the medium business people who are working every hour that God sends to make a success. They put their homes on the line. They want their business to succeed. They're not lazy. They are trying their hardest, but there just aren't enough customers, or they haven't got enough money to spend. It's called, in the jargon of economics, which that member doesn't know, an output gap. And Treasury says we've got one still. Not enough demand in the economy. That's why this zero budget makes zero difference, Mr Speaker. So these real people are the real casualties of this budget. Our friends, our neighbours, our constituents, our family members. They've been told to expect the best, and what they got was a zero budget. And it's not enough. It is not enough. Tinkering is not enough. A zero budget is not enough. Balancing the books is not enough. It's not enough to get people back to work. It's not enough to get businesses back afloat. It's not enough to stem the tide of people going to Australia. We want a future we can believe in. We want an economy that can sustainably grow and provide for our beautiful children. That is what we want. Not a zero budget, not a zero vision, not zero hope. That is what we want. So how should a budget deliver on those things? Before I turn to that, Mr. Speaker, I just need to say that the press has cottoned on to what's going on here. Here are some quotes on this issue of economic development and sustainable growth. From Fran O'Sullivan, no lefty, Mr. Speaker. The major problem is that there's no clear economic growth agenda. Or the Herald editorial, again, no left-wing rag. The budget delivered yesterday by the Minister of Finance has a distinctly underwhelming feel. Or Fairfax, it was billed as a zero budget, that's what we got. Or Brian Fallow saying, it's definitely contractionary. Fiscal policy will subtract from demand and growth, not just next year, but the next 4. Or John Armstrong in the Herald, a fiscal surplus is not a growth strategy, and so it goes on. But of course, it's easy to criticise, it's hard to build, and what the public wants is hope for a better future. Here is what Labour would do, Mr. Speaker. Labour is going to provide leadership that is willing to take the tough decisions and try new ideas to grow jobs and incomes. And as my colleague David Parker has rightly said, if you change nothing, nothing changes. There is the party of conservatism, the party of steady as she goes, the party of Keith Jacker Holyoake, which may have been appropriate when we were all collectively on the sheep's back, but we aren't on the cow's back now. We've got all our cows on one basket and the basket's leaking. Mr. Speaker, change nothing. Nothing changes. Change nothing, Renato. Your people won't find change. And Mr. Speaker, there are some things we can do individually, and we should. We do not abdicate individual responsibility. We believe in co-responsibility. The responsibility of the individual to society and society to the individual. And we cannot all individually solve the problems of this economy. We must do it collectively. That is why our Constitution vests in the Treasury benches the responsibility to guide our country through, not to balance their own books at the expense of the people's books, not to pull a zero budget at the cost of zero hope. Mr. Speaker, the mandate is deeper, broader, richer, and more sacred than that. Mr. Speaker, Labour will create jobs by supporting our exporters to expand and earn more. We will help Kiwis get the education and skills they need. We will grow incomes by investing in science and innovation. And we'll make it easier for New Zealanders to save for their first home and for their retirement. And we will do it with the following. I'm going to mention just 6 tools. Firstly, pro-growth tax reform, like capital gains tax that gets money flowing where it can do more good, and R&D tax incentives that get our innovators going. Increasing savings through Universal KiwiSaver, the R&D tax credits, monetary policy, fiscal policy that seeks to balance demand and supply across the cycle and across the economy. An economic development policy that works with every sector and every region in the country so that every New Zealander can be the best that they can be. And what has this government done to the budget and economic development? Well, it's cut it. It's cut by 2/3 the seed co-investment fund that helps struggling businesses get up to the next level. It's cut, would you believe, the in-market assistance to help people export to China and India. It has cut regional development by 90% around the country, and they say they want growth. It has cut industry assistance. It has cut development in our regions. It has cut assistance for exporters. It is cutting our future. Mr. Speaker, big words, Big numbers, big problems. But at the end of the day, real people who deserve real hope and real policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Andrew Williams, is this a split call?